Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar book review. This is going to be my non-spoiler review for The Reckoning of Roku. So obviously this is being done roughly 2 weeks before the book properly releases. For anyone wondering, as I've covered in news videos before, some places in America have been selling and shipping out the book early. If you're wondering how I got it early, all I'll say is that someone who did get the book early helped me out, so I was able to start my video coverage early, and that's what happened there. So yes, this will be a non-spoiler review to start off my coverage of the book. I will then have a spoiler review probably next week on Tuesday, as in like 1 week to go until release, which is of course July 23rd is the official release date for the book, ebook, audiobook, and hardcover. Also, note, same day actually release, Rise of Kyoshi paperback version, finally out after all these years. So yeah, non-spoiler review, spoiler review, and then chapter analysis videos, probably very well known for these. I will be doing them, and I will be starting them pre-release. But I will only be doing probably the first 4 or 5 chapters of the book prior to July 23rd. That way I can get into it properly after that, and pre-release I will have only really covered the chapters that are already out there via the Screen Rant and also Amazon previews. That's why I'm choosing to do those specific early chapters first, because everyone can read them already, and it just gives me a really nice kind of early jump start on coverage. With the amount of videos that I do for covering the novels, it's always good to have the time to get a head start and do the kind of often awkward to record, quite long non-spoiler spoiler reviews, and then just getting a jump start on the like 30 something videos for the chapter analysis ones. So yeah, lots of coverage coming on Roku, including a podcast. There'll be a live stream probably a month after the official release of the book. That way a lot of people have time to read it before we get into the full big discussion getting towards the end of my coverage. But yes, let's finally start the non-spoiler review here. So obviously I will be talking about a certain amount of details, and so if you are really particular about spoilers, you might actually find some of my non-spoiler thoughts to be a little bit spoilery, but I'm not going to be talking about the resolution to plot points or anything like that. I will be doing my usual thing of giving like a slight extra teaser beyond what like the description of the book shows. This book, I think especially, has maybe overly hidden what the actual plot is for, I would say, no real reason. Like, I think they should be very much promoting this book on the basis of this book is interesting not because of this, but because of that. And that thing is actually revealed in like the 3rd chapter. It's out there in the preview stuff, but how many people have read the Amazon full preview compared to how many people have read the Screen Rant kind of big article that came out, that sort of idea. And they probably should have chosen a more interesting chapter, I think, to do for the main preview chapter, but that's just, in my mind, relatively weak marketing for these books, where like there's been very few times where I feel they've actually been properly promoted by like the official channels. I'm assuming week of release they'll do a little bit more. Might be an interview with Randy Rabai, which might talk about, I think, the actually interesting stuff in the book. Maybe they'll confirm that there will be a second Roku book. That would be cool. But I would say, yeah, they maybe haven't done this book as much of a service as they need to. So overall, I like the book. I want to make that really clear in terms of broad recommendations. I think it's 5 out of 5 for good Avatar novels. Obviously, there's debate to be had about, you know, where exactly you rank each one against the other ones. The different avatars, of course, very different. The Kyoshi books are hugely different compared to the Yang Chen books, and the Roku book here is very different than both of them. They're about different avatars who have different kind of entries to being the avatar. So what we have here is, early on in Roku's training, a very inexperienced and lacking in confidence Roku, compared to Yang Chen, who at the exact same age is a fully realized avatar, and is just trying her best to be that fully realized avatar and dealing with some of the challenges that she faces entering the kind of political landscape. Whereas with the Kyoshi book, we got more of a really heavily personal, plot-based discovery as the Avatar, false Avatar Yoon, all that stuff happening there that affected Kyoshi on a personal level, and how the crazy way in which she eventually found out she was the Avatar, and what then happened after that. They're very different styles of thing. I think to a certain degree with the novels, it's always going to be the case that I think the Kyoshi novels are basically going to be regarded as being the best of the novels, because there's just something so special about them. Lightning in a bottle was captured with the right the right avatar in Kyoshi, the right characters, the right plot. Everything just, I think, worked for those first two novels. And that's not to say that what has followed has been like bad. It's just that you are trying to then bring out books that try to be in the same ballpark as this thing that people regard so highly. I love both Yang Chen books, and I would say I love this Roku book as well. And I like that they're all different. And I think this Roku book, in a way, does a few things that I think are the right choices to, I think, get around the fact that it might actually be a little bit of a weakness, that maybe, like, is Roku's arc in this book the most interesting thing, kind of an experienced avatar? But they back that up with the fact that we've got quite a bit of Sozin focused in this book, and that's really good. Sozin is hugely interesting in this book. We get another point of view character in this book who is a native of the mysterious island. I won't say too much about that character other than that her name is Malaka, and I think she's quite interesting, and it highlights that the book does explore that island in a pretty big way from a relatively early point as well, which, yes, they mention Mysterious Island in the description, but it's unclear if this is big reveal at the end of the book style thing, or is it actually going to be a world-building exploration. It is more of a world-building exploration, where the island is the plot of the book. It's not just about the politics surrounding the island, but no, the island itself and the people on it is a major focus of the book. And so that works so well for me. That's, like, probably the highlight coming out of this, is that the book isn't kind of make or break purely on the basis of, is specifically the Roku character arc super strong. I like what's there. It is a little bit more simplistic because it is like standard avatar journey, character lacking in confidence, stepping up for the first time style thing, and they do it well. But you then have the interesting nuance, in-depth kind of characterization that is Sozin, like teenage Sozin, Prince Sozin before he becomes Fire Lord Sozin, and the fact that this is Roku's best friend, and them getting the balance between highlighting the fact that he is honestly a very good friend to Roku and values that friendship as one of the most important things in his life, but then he also has these supreme ambitions, and he's setting the stage in a way for when he becomes Fire Lord, because he views his father as basically not being up to standard in a way. Like you're all the things you could do as Fire Lord, but you're focused on this thing over here. Like, open your mind in a way. But like the difference between father and son is quite interesting in the book here. Fire Lord Taiso compared to Prince Sozin, it's an interesting one. Taiso isn't in huge focus, but from the previous stuff which we've already seen, you already get a little bit of the sense here of like Taiso, you know, has some issues with Sozin surrounding a few things that have happened, but as you see, it is more of a case of Taiso lacks the vision that Sozin seems to have, and I think we know that Sozin is the one who is the more ambitious leader. Obviously in a bad way for the world that is the case. It's probably safer for the world that you have a Fire Lord who thinks he's incredible but isn't actually that great, and that whole dynamic I think is quite good. But I like the book because it kind of acknowledges that like just Roku's early journey might not be the most interesting thing, so it fills the rest of it in with some interesting additional stuff. let's not forget Gyatso is also in this book. And while he is not like a hugely, again, character focus, part of the book, the scenes with him and Roku as they become friends are very nice, and you really do see how this is the first member of Roku's like team avatar, and they do a good job at kind of connecting their arcs together in a little bit of an interesting way, which I'll get into in a little bit further on in the video. But there's some nice stuff with Gyatso that I think they do more than I expected kind of with him. Because again, what is the obvious speculation heading into this book with the Gyatso thing? And it's like, well, we know Gyatso from his interactions with Aang, and then we were told, of course, that Roku and Gyatso are friends. The RPG doesn't tell us too much about Gyatso, so Gyatso is very much a bit of an open book as well in terms of like what is the characterization for this character we know in a few different ways, and I think they handled that pretty well with the idea that there probably is more to come as well. So that's definitely quite good. Getting into, I suppose, more of the kind of in-depth, like, kind of character analysis style things. Roku's arc, of course, like I said, it's the character who isn't very confident being put into a role where he's kind of required to be confident. But what are the actual themes of what they do with his arc? Again, from the preview chapters, you get the idea that one of them is he needs to learn to be a spirit of no nation. He needs to change his mentality from being, I am a Fire Nation noble, I am a Fire National, to I am the Avatar, and because of that, I'm at the same time, in a way, part of no nation, but I'm a part of all of them at the same time. And that is a bit of a challenge for Roku, who just prior to starting his journey has been given an artifact that feels like it always connects him to the Fire Nation, and that is the Crown Prince headpiece. And that's part of the issue here. His airbending master, Sister Daisha, doesn't really want to start his airbending training until he kind of learns to kind of, move away from being the Fire National. And that headpiece always kind of represents that. But it's interesting because we know historically Roku will go on to become an avatar kind of not known for this, not falling into the same trap as some of the other Fire avatars who always have that, suspicion of bias to the Fire Nation following them around. He becomes known as someone who has a connection to all of the nations and is fair to all of them and is deeply involved in the world, but respects the nations individually for what they are. So that's an interesting arc by itself. As for, I suppose, to a certain degree, where does Roku's lack of confidence come from? Part of it is just that as a character, he isn't that laser-focused, confident character. That's just not what his personality is. But there is more of a kind of reason for why he is kind of more in the background compared to like the dominant force in a way that Sozin is. Sozin is very much the leader of that duo of friends. But one of the very interesting things you get early on in the book that I think is good for Sozin's character and Roku's character both, and it actually links a little bit into Gyatso's plot as well, and this is why it's cleverly written, is the idea that in the past, the duo was actually a trio of friends. It was Roku, of course, Sozin, but also Roku's brother. And we find out, again, from the early chapters, we know Roku has a brother. I won't go too much in depth on this, but I'll say some of the things here of like, it's Roku's twin brother, so they were born on the same day, meaning these three characters were born on the same day. They each effectively had an equal shot to be the Avatar. Because of the timing of it. But because of that, you have these three really important characters who were all best friends. And then you immediately ask the question, well, there's only two of them as far as we're aware. What happened to the other one? What happened to Roku's brother? And yes, early on you are effectively told that this character died in some way. And this is an emotional arc throughout the book as it affects Roku, is finding out what the loss of his brother meant to him, but also, like with Sozin, what the loss of one of his other best friends meant to Sozin, and how that death affected then the remaining two friends, and how that has kind of shaped their dynamic together. That's quite interesting. And how Gyatso's arc links in is that Gyatso, what they kind of do with him as a character is that they highlight, in the same way that Roku can't airbend. He really hasn't properly started his training. He hasn't adjusted his mentality to fit airbending yet. He can't airbend. Gyatso has gone from being like a prodigal airbender on the path to getting his tattoos at a super early age to all of a sudden his airbending is inconsistent. It just goes out at certain times. It comes back at other times. He can't consistently use it to the point where effectively he's been banned from using his glider for safety reasons. Like, what if his airbending went out while he's in the middle of gliding? That would be a disaster. And so he feels like his freedom to a certain degree is gone because of this, and he needs to fix his airbending. And so Sister Daisha sort of pairs them up to a certain degree, and you're not really sure why. And you basically, again, without getting into it too much, find out that also Gyatso has a recent loss in his past. Someone close to him died, and that has affected what's been going on there. And so one of the things that, in addition to the two of them just having the fun banter together and gradually becoming closer, is that they are able to bond over both having somewhat recent losses kind of in their past, and that kind of brings them closer together. The exact details of like what happens with each character, I will of course leave for the spoiler discussion here, but just to broadly present thematically what we're doing, that is the arc kind of ultimately. So you can see that even though Roku is realistically maybe not the strongest arc in the book, there's quite a lot going on there, because there's like his relationship with Gyatso, with Sozin, with being the Avatar to a certain degree, and then all this other stuff, his brother, that's going on. Sozin is in the book a reasonable amount. Again, to make it clear, Sozin does not go on the mission with Roku. He still is the one to sort of give Roku that mission to go to the island, but the uniqueness of the plot is really about sort of like the whys of like, one, how did Sozin know about this island? And for what reason is he interested in this island? That's the big thing as we begin to set up the mystery of why is this island so important. And we find out that, in a way, why we get Sozin point of view chapters in this book, and that, in a surprise, they're not just him hanging out in the Fire Nation doing political stuff with his father. No, they're like adventure chapters. Sozin is on his own little kind of arc doing stuff. Because you sort of see that one of the ways in which Sozin plans for the future, his ambition to a certain degree, is he looks into the legends of the past. There's a bit of kind of Indiana Jones style stuff kind of going on here, where he goes on a bit of an adventurer style thing, following the legends of bending techniques and ancient stories and stuff like that to investigate things. And that's what brings him to this island. That's what brings the island into focus. And so you find out that, oh yeah, like he specifically has asked Roku to go here for his own gain. And this is the idea of, with the Roku Sozin dynamic, it's things have changed now that Sozin is going to be the future Fire Lord, and Roku is going to one day be the fully realized Avatar. And it's the idea of, well, will I always have the loyalty of my friend who is the Avatar for the Fire Nation, or will he change? Do I start to need to manipulate him to my side? And will that work? How long will it work? These type of questions going through Sozin's head, because Roku is honestly his best friend and he cares about him a lot, especially because of things that have happened in the past. And now politics have sort of changed that to a certain degree, but they don't want it to change it, but it's inevitably going to happen. It's destined to happen. We know it happens in 306. And a lot of the scenes read so interestingly in that way, where like if you have watched 306 recently, some of these scenes like feel so foreshadowing for what's like about to happen. That's very, very interesting to me to interpret a lot of these scenes overall. So yeah, some of the stuff Sozin gets up to is just so interesting, like just puts a smile on your face as like a lore fan, that like, whoa, I can't believe Sozin is over here doing this thing in this book. That's just like kind of unbelievable to me. And in that sense, sidebar here on, I suppose, lore, world building, that sort of just information reveal style thing that these books are known for. How much of that stuff do we get? So immediately, some of the questions that typically get asked, like new avatars. We get the name of one new avatar. Won't go into the details on it, but we get the name of one new avatar. Very cool. Always good to get that stuff. People, especially once they did it in the first novel, it was like, okay, so this is where we're going to get our reveals from, type thing. Past avatars that we actually already know a little bit about, especially because it's Roku, all of them are open basically. So what are we doing here? Again, from the previews, we know we get a few Zito references. There are further Zito references throughout the book. We learn a couple of more specific details about him that I think are quite interesting, and it makes sense. Roku's a fire avatar, inevitably ends up comparing himself to a previous fire avatar. Makes sense. Kyoshi. We do get some Kyoshi stuff. It only makes sense as part of the story that the legacy of the avatar who lives to be 230 years old, her era has just ended. And the thing that basically most people have known, all they have ever known, is Kyoshi's era. And now it's over. That's a change in the world. And a whole era, a true era that long is over. And there is a real sense that, like, do people think that they can actually do stuff they couldn't do during the Kyoshi era because she was so focused on keeping justice in the world? And you do explore some of that stuff. There's some really kind of almost surprising explorations of Kyoshi that you get in this book at times. But they don't go excessively into detail. That if you go into this book expecting, and in a way all you want is for it to be backstory on the end of Kyoshi's life, you're probably going to be a little bit disappointed here, because no, we're not talking about Rangi here or that sort of kind of intimate details of Kyoshi's life. It is more of the legacy of a long-lived avatar, that era coming to an end, and Roku kind of, in a way, it adding to his lack of confidence of like, I have to follow up Kyoshi as the avatar, and I'm already not the most confident character, and I don't have confidence in myself, and it's Kyoshi who's the one I have to follow up. Oh no, it's over, type thing. That's more of what it's about. But, you know, there are little drops of information telling you things of just like, oh yeah, the world has been at peace for this long because of Kyoshi and how long she lived. And like I said, there's a few other interesting bits and pieces that are kind of interesting as well when it comes to that. Otherwise, do they drop information on other characters? Like, there are name drops, but like, there's not really like new information on like a lot of the other avatars. Like, Yang Chen gets referenced here, Karuk gets referenced there, but it's in very much the obvious way of one of the more recent avatars gets referenced. Other world building stuff, like there's actually quite a decent amount of mention of like just legends surrounding bending techniques that, again, I would say very little of it is new, but the way in which they kind of casually drop just like, oh, that's interesting. I think people are actually going to really like that bit of information. That's super interesting. Just to almost keep track of like the flow of information surrounding certain bending techniques is quite cool. But again, don't want to spoil a lot of that stuff, but it's there. This book definitely has that fun factor that was, I think, very much there, especially with the first Kyoshi novel, where it just felt like nearly every paragraph there's just something there that's like, that detail is so cool. I want to talk about that with people. Just whether it be the name of a place, the acknowledgement of this thing, a reference to history, those type of things, it's here. And so I'll sort of use that, I suppose, to transition us into, this book has a new writer. I don't think I've really talked about it in this video so far. Randy Rabai is our new author on this book. He has stepped in to replace FCE after FCE did the first 4 novels. When it was announced, there was a lot of like, oh, is this going to be okay? Are we going to be okay? Are the novels still going to be good? FCE did such a great job, because I think people liked the style so much and what the novels were able to do. Is a new writer coming on board going to be able to do the same, or is the novels, are they just going to feel different now? My broad sense, after reading this book now twice, is that I barely noticed that it is a different writer. And I will say that, look, even though I've been doing reviews for Avatar stuff for a really long time, I'm maybe not the reviewer to get super into the weeds on the technical aspects of like writing style when it comes to just like the art of writing. I'm more of the Avatar information details lore guy. But I think I've read these novels with enough detail to where when I say that like I think it's written in a very similar style to FCE, I think, broadly speaking, I think you know what I mean by that. It's a YA book still. So the level of detail writing, the way stuff is presented, it's very on par. It's all these books I have found to in general be quite quick reads because of the style of YA. It's like slightly more detailed than like a light novel. That's the way that these typically are. You're not going to get lost in the text, because we don't get lost explaining details for pages upon pages. And that's just the way it is. And you'll note that when I went through the little lore section there, I basically talked about it in the way I talk about an FCE book. Like the drops of information just throughout the whole book are very nice. You get names, references to previous avatars, locations. They drop stuff like Earth King Jaialun, like the name of leaders, all over the place a little bit. And you kind of wonder to a certain degree of course, like, okay, some of that stuff is just, I suppose, the Avatar Studios sort of like oversight on the book is going to allow for a lot of that information to just kind of work really nicely with whoever the author is. But I think the author does construct a lot of the arcs quite nicely. Like, I'm guessing, a lot of the decisions, like what I praised at the start about the idea of having like Roku chapters, Sozin chapters, island native chapters, was a really good idea, and I think it helps the book to be stronger, and just that kind of like almost bold decision to be like, we don't need to focus on Roku like as strongly as maybe some of the other books have had entirely on their avatars. That, yeah, we can use more of the chapters to develop some of the other characters, because I think that's maybe been some of the feedback about some of the other books, is that like, yeah, I would have liked like Jujinta to actually get a little bit more focus. I would have liked Rangi to get a little bit more focus in this book, and I feel like there's a bit more of that kind of going on here. And so, like, broadly speaking, I think Randy Rabai did a very good job on the Roku novel here. In terms of criticisms of the book, I wouldn't have like too many. Towards the end, again, without getting into details here, I think some of the details as we approach the ending, maybe it's like the pacing starts to get a bit quicker, and so some of the details fall out a little bit, and it just feels like, wait, go back and explain that a little bit, and then they don't quite do that, and it feels like, are you being vague on purpose here, or do you just not have the details? It's still fine mostly, but like I we've been pretty detailed up to now. And it just has felt a little bit, as you've accelerated the story towards the end, some of the plot details have, fallen out a little bit. I do think some of that is probably purposeful in this book in terms of how it's constructed and how the mystery kind of unfolds. But just, it's more of a minor criticism. It's not that, like, I'm trying to say the plot falls apart at the end or anything like that. It's just in terms of achieving perfection in terms of what we were trying to go for here, not quite nailing everything at the end. But I also would say part of that is the uncertainty, and we've had this before with the novels, like the Yan Chen book, where like you're only told almost like last minute that like there is going to be a second Yan Chen book, and right now we don't know there is going to be a second Roku novel. There probably will be, but they haven't confirmed it yet, and because of that, my interpretation of the ending is a little bit like, is this direct setup for like book 2 happening like immediately afterwards here, or is this like a ending for now and we can pick up like a few years from now and kind of mostly do a separate story, but like bring some of these elements back in later, and that just not being as clear. But I do think that's maybe, broadly speaking, maybe some of the challenges of Chronicles of the Avatar is because we focus so much in on the avatars when they're teenagers, we wonder about what happens in their later lives. So with Kyoshi, the fact that there's over 200 years of history with the character that we know very little about, it would be nice to get a book that was maybe a little bit more willing to kind of montage through parts of her life to hit some of these points out, but they don't seem to want to do that just yet. So again, keeping it non-spoiler, I'm mostly going to, I suppose, move towards wrapping it up here. I could probably talk more about other characters, but like I said, I don't want to go too much into the details. That, like, say, in the Sozin chapters, he has other characters with him as part of his own little team on the kind of adventure that he goes on, and they're kind of fun, but I'll leave them to be discussed mostly in the future. It's a similar thing with some of the other books where, like, maybe some of the characters who are more on the outskirts of the plot, could they have used a little bit more development? Perhaps, yes, but what's here is pretty good overall. You know, there might be elements that people, in terms of expectations, might have felt this should have been used a little bit more. That, like, I think there was maybe some excitement going into this book that, like, might Princess Zaysan be a significant part of the book, whereas she's more, like, referenced a few times and is acknowledged, not just the RPG anymore, which is good, but not a focus, but maybe room to do more with in the future. There's bits and pieces like that of, like, this book can't cover everything that's Roku related, and you have to be a little bit patient, and that, like, there likely will be time to explore more stuff in, we assume, the second Roku novel. So, like I said, mostly very good once again. Little kind of issues here and there that are sort of the broad issues that probably are just present with these novels across the board because they're YA, because of the kind of way they're written. One thing I like about the book as well is actually, like, it's like 360 pages, whereas I think some of the more recent books have been like 320 pages. I still feel I would like a return to like what we had with Rise of Kyoshi, where it's like 420 pages. You can feel little bits and pieces where, like, yeah, this could have used a little bit more just to flesh some things out, but for whatever reason, they've made a decision with novels after the first one to move more towards the somewhere in the mid 300s as being the page count rather than being 400. But you know, there might be some debate on that. Some people might think the books are too long. I've tended maybe to think they could have used a little bit more time, but this being longer than some of the previous books, like, you know, I appreciated those couple extra pages that we got this time. But yeah, I think the best thing I could say, probably coming out of the non-spoiler review, is that I am desperate to talk about the specifics with other people. So I'm eager to, like, record my spoiler thoughts and see what people have to say about specific bits and pieces. I'm extremely excited to get started on the chapter analysis videos, but like I said, they'll be coming up over the coming days. So I'm still planning out exactly how to do everything, but, like, you'll probably see my first chapter analysis video, like, fairly soon, because the prologue, you know, like, we've seen it already. Chapter 1 is the Screen Rant preview, so you'll see that stuff, and then spoiler review probably in or around this time next week. But that's basically been everything I want to talk about here. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the book yourself in non-spoiler fashion, if you have managed to also get the book early. Are there any things you might want a little bit of a teaser or a kind of a to ask me about ahead of you reading the book yourself, I'll try and answer what I can in non-spoiler fashion below. But otherwise, that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.